down, just as the voice had commanded, and put down his hat and satchel. Then he rapped timidly on the door with "Chief" painted on the wood. A light curtain covered the dark window beside it. "When does Chief Mosca arrive?" It was an insignificant question, something he almost felt foolish asking, and their agreement was apparent by their silence. He returned to his desk. When he sat down, his chair collapsed beneath him. They had all laughed then, even the security inspector. He sprang up. The chair was in pieces. The rope that bound its legs together had snapped or been cut. Their amused faces turned back to their desks as he tied the chair together again with a fishing knot. It wobbled, but held. By the time he was finished, the laughter had been over a long time. It was then that he had reached for the center drawer, if for no other reason than to look busy. Maybe it was a joke. He didn't know. They had laughed, so perhaps there was nothing more to this than some gentle hazing, like in the academy, when they buried his papers in the middle of the firing range, or when he lay in the mud and they gave him one kick apiece. Certainly this was easier than that. He set the newspaper aside. In one dusty corner was a brown porcelain heater for winter time, as tall as a man, and along the walls 3 desks faced the center, faced him. The 4th desk, the state security inspector's, faced the wall. He settled back into his creaking chair and affected a calm he didn't feel. He arranged the ink bottle on his desk and straightened the blotter, then placed his transfer papers, in triplicate as required, along the edge. From his burlap satchel he brought out the cigars and the leather-bound notepad his grandfather had been able to unearth in the black market off Heroes Square. If he focused on these little things, he could make it. The inspectors lounged at their desks, sweating, chewing dried pumpkin seeds, sometimes muttering into telephones, other times writing or smoking. The big one continued typing. 2 of them, one scrawny and very dark, the other heavy and limping, spitting out flakes of pumpkin seed, met beside yellowed wanted notices and joked quietly with one another. The sound of their laughter left small, cold spots in Emil's guts. They left the office together and returned, smelling of clear alcohols. The fat one carried a fresh bag of tobacco with nicotine-yellowed fingers. A man outside was shouting in Russian. Although the rowdy Russian soldiers that still occupied their small capital disturbed him as much as the next person, at that moment he wanted to be with them under the sun, rather than in this dim, humid room with his own kind. He stood without knowing why. Then, as he approached the massive typist, he knew he would start with the largest, if only to instill faith in his courage. Emil rapped on the big man's desk beside an empty paper cup blackened by the morning's grounds. "When do I get coffee around here?" He stopped typing and looked at Emil's hand as though his finger were a cockroach. This close, the inspector's face was pocked and misshapen like a battlefield. "No coffee," he said flatly. He crushed the cup in his hand, then tossed it in his wastebasket. Emil's tightened. He smiled involuntarily and stepped back to his desk. He could hear laughter somewhere. It was faint and distant beneath the hot buzzing of his blood. So was the glint of his polished shoes moving across the floor. He was a stiff clown among these wrinkled, dusty brutes. He remembered the academy director's words. "First District, homicide. Desk's been open 2 years since some old poop named Sergei got himself shot after liberation. They'll take anyone brought. Why not you?" Why not indeed? The Spark was full of airplanes. It had been full of blockades and planes since June. Muddy newsprint airplanes on cheap, brittle pages, but they were clear enough. Allied airplanes over hills of rubble, airplanes over military convoys, airplanes over the hungry, defeated masses of a crushed Berlin, dropping parachutes with little boxes of food and chocolates and clothing, and some reports said. Guns. The front page never changed, not even today. A part of him had expected to find the planes replaced by his own face, thin and pale, blonde eyebrows almost invisible above his green eyes, beneath the headline, Emil Brod moves into the working world, no more lessons for him. But there they still were, after weeks. Airplanes. Imperial underhandedness in Berlin. Comrade Chairman Stalin called the institution of a new German currency a provocation. If the Allies had their way, a reborn capitalist Germany would consume the workers of the world in fire. General Secretary Mihai, whose office was only a few streets away, reminded all citizens that their own country was small and young. It could easily be divided out of existence again by the republics around it. No one misunderstood his meaning. Before the Great War, we were only a district of the dual monarchy. Remember Versailles, he told a reporter. The others would claim we are theirs, but we are not pieces of the Ukraine and Czechoslovakia. We're neither Romania nor Hungary nor Poland. We are our own indivisible nation. Then, up with the Comrade Chairman. The second page listed upcoming trials. It was no longer like the days just after the liberation, when the lists went on for many columns, but there were still some men and women accused of undermining the stability of their socialist state. There were a baker and 3 politicians and 2 tram drivers, which proved, according to a certain well-regarded Inspector Brano Sev, the democratic sensibility inherent in the instruments of criminal justice. Around noon, he tried the smallest one, the wiry, dark inspector who sat beside the cold porcelain stove. He had a face that reminded Emil of the Jews who had appeared at the family dacha in Raskova during the war. They had come in loose, hungry bands from over the Romanian border, muttering frantically about the Archangel Michael and their villages being burned to the ground. Their families, they said, had been chopped up by the Orthodox. This inspector had that same hungry, war refugee look. Emil spoke to him over the hand basins in the empty washroom. His voice echoed unexpectedly against the tile walls. "How long does this go on?" The inspector stopped splashing water over the back of his neck. He looked at Emil in the rusting mirror, hungry brow furrowing. Beneath Emil's feet the decaying floor tiles wobbled. "The silence," he said, trying to make his voice sound light, conversational. "Is this what everyone goes through? I think I know how this works. Initiation?" He twisted his lips into a smile. "Or are you trying to scare me away?" He almost added jokingly that this situation hadn't come up in the academy lessons, but thought better of it. The inspector turned away, shook water off his hands, and used a towel from a hook. His dark features gave away nothing, his eyes hard and small as he dried his neck. He gave Emil only a passing glance in the mirror as he hung up the towel again. Then he left. The creaking door echoed behind him. They left the office singly and in pairs and did not return for hours. He assumed they were on cases. The academy had taught 2 ways for a homicide inspector to receive a case. Either a switchboard operator sent a message to your telephone line, or the station chief emerged from his office and handed you one. All through the morning the phone on Emil's desk did not ring, and the chief was never in. He got coffee from a workers' cafe around the corner, returned, used the toilet twice, read the last pages of the Spark, all slowly, purposefully. Around 2 o'clock, Chief Mosca appeared in the doorway. He was another big man, in his 50s, who hiked up wrinkled, mud-spotted pants, rolled a cigarette in his lips, and took off his hat to mop damp gray hair with a handkerchief. He stopped by desks and whispered to his men, and when they smiled, Emil's stomach shriveled. These men were tight, had been for years.